Hi, and welcome back to another episode of The Breakdown with Bethany. I'm Bethany Braun-Silva, and today my guest is the fabulous, ultra inspirational, one of my personal heroes, Tamron Hall. I had the great good fortune of being on Tamron's show in 2023 to talk about motherhood and parenting, parenting styles, all of it. Tamron is a champion of parenting and talks about it so much on her incredible show. So for her to come on my show was quite the honor. And of course, we're going to be talking about parenting, career, and her new book, Harlem Honey, which comes out March 25th. It is a fabulous inspirational children's book based on her own son, Moses, and his journey and his personality and all of that. So be sure to check out this interview and then go buy or pre-order Harlem Honey or buy it on March 25th. Tamron, I'm so excited that you're here. I've been an admirer for so long. I admire your passion for talking about parenting topics. I've actually been on your show to talk about motherhood and parenting, and you've been very open about becoming a mother later in life. I put that in quotes because I really don't believe there's any kind of timeline or guideline around when or how someone becomes a mother. But given the time that you did welcome Moses, I'm wondering how that shaped your approach to parenting and actually your career as well.
For me, the first word that came to mind when you were asking the question was patience. I don't think, last night, for example, we were watching the Oscars,
Yeah.
and my son is doing his first musical, which I mean, kind of ties into the book that I've written, my children's book. It's really about having a shy child and encouraging them to open up to the world, and that on the other side of fear are great things, right? So we're there having dinner, and all of a sudden, Ariana starts singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. That's the song they're singing in school, which is the musical is The Day the Crayons Quit, which is a popular book, as you know. So he's never seen Ariana Grande. He doesn't know who she is. He doesn't know what the Oscars are, and she's singing his song, all he knows, and he is mesmerized. He's doing the whole little dance moves that they are, going to do at their musical coming up. And then the song's over, and I said, it's time to go to bed. And he's like, no, I want to stay up and watch the Oscars. I'm like, you don't know what the Oscars are, and let's get going. He threw a tantrum that was probably maybe the worst ever in my 5 years of knowing him. And past the 2-year-old things, I mean, because now he's 5 and he can advocate for himself, and he's very opinionated, which is this balance of keeping a kid who's strong, but without also having a kid that's not respectful, right? So he's going just cranky and everything. 20s, 30-year-old me might not have handled that situation as I took a deep breath,
Yeah.
and he's just crying, and I want dad, and every tactic you can imagine. And I maintain my steady, my calm. I said, we're going to go. The only difference, I'll tell you, I did have to pick him up and kind of like carry him to the room. I did wish I had those 27-year-old bones then, because that little solid guy. So I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get to Pilates more, but it's patience. Not to say that I would not have had, the level of patience. It's an unknown, right? It's an unknown. My mom was a 19-year-old single mom. I can only imagine um, the pressure, the stress, the insecurity, the all of these things, why me, all these rightful feelings that she must have had. At 48, when I had my son, I was more confident in myself. Imagine, 27-year-old me, I thought I knew everything. 48-year-old me is a different woman. And I think it's patience. And I just gave you an example of something I know I probably would have handled so differently a few years ago. Continue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think as mothers, no matter where we are, no matter what age we are, we always have to meet the moment, right, with our children. And I think more time always helps us to be more well equipped to meet those moments.
Because we are a part of their journey while our journey is still continuing, right? And so there are things that I'm learning about myself each and every day that are separate from being a mom, but they coincide. I've learned meditation. I meditate twice a day. I do transcendental meditation. Um, I've learned to try and not see those quiet moments of this is what I need versus this is what I'm owed to myself, right? And so for me, while I'm evolving as a mother and hoping to have a positive impact in his life, I'm still evolving as a person.
Right.
And so I think an acknowledgement of, and maybe that's becoming such a late mom to the party, as I like to say as well. For me, I am aware of what is important. When I look at my core memories, now that I've written this kids book and I think about my own life, I can close my eyes right now, Bethany, and describe to you my room at age 6. I had a canopy bed. I had all of these little books. I had my Nancy Drew. I can tell you where those books are because my mother stressed reading. She wanted me to feel safe at home and didn't want me to see those challenges that she was facing. And so my core memories are someone telling me I can do it, someone believing in me, someone also saying you can't jump off the sofa and triple backflip because you're going to hurt yourself. Um, but I think being 48 has given me the perspective of womanhood and motherhood and them being different but the same.
That's so beautiful. And I mentioned how much I admire you, and I've certainly sort of followed the trajectory of your career. You spent a lifetime, or really your professional lifetime, telling powerful stories. So I'm also wondering how, motherhood has influenced the way you approach journalism, the types of stories that you choose to bring onto the show.
First of all, that's why I love our conversations and I love that connection because as a journalist, when I was in the morning TV world, we talked, and rightfully so, a lot about the medical data, the challenges, usually those kinds of stories that are meant to make you aware, impact change, and they can be from a lens of challenge versus when I started the show, I remember our first Mother's Day show, and I said, I don't want a panel of people saying how hard it is.
Right.
I don't want a panel of people on Mother's Day all leading with the challenge. And that doesn't mean I want you to ignore it. But in my years of being in morning TV, it was often a book that was meant to address a problem, a study. Data shows the negative impact of digital on our kids. Here's what you can do. And then that's necessary. That is absolutely necessary. But I recognize with the talk show, I had an opportunity to approach motherhood from a much more joyful space and also a space of next chapter. So many of the women who watch our show are thinking, well, when my child gets to high school and I'm looking to start a business. We did a phenomenal show once. Like I wish I thought of that show. A mom and her two women, a grandmom and a mom, came up with this gadget that allows you to push open
The
the car
seatbelt,
seat.
the car
Yes.
seat. I know the Shark Tank. They were on Shark Tank.
Yeah,
Yes.
they were on
I,
Shark
yes.
Tank.
Yes.
And business did okay after Shark Tank, but they still needed to finesse it on their own. And they did. And it's huge. And they came on our show. That's the kind of conversation I enjoy as well, because it is without saying, look what these moms did after the kids were out of the house. You're showing by example that your womanhood journey and your motherhood journey are different but the same. And so I really we have done How to Raise a Resilient Child. Jonathan Haidt was on, and Tova Klein, some great minds in the space of child development. But for me, I enjoy the fun conversations about it, because it's a choice for us, right? And when I was writing my book, Harlem Honey, there were so many things that flooded through my mind, but I wanted to lead with an authentic space of where I am, or when I wrote the book, where I was as a mom. I had a kid who's super outgoing, super like Mr. around the house. He thinks he runs the place, but we would leave out of our home and he would turn into a completely different kid. So shy. We would look at my son and think like, who are you right now?
Yeah.
And we would return home from an outing or a birthday party where he was, in the corner or maybe not talking. And he could tell you what everyone wore, every song played. So he was paying attention and he wanted to be a part, but he struggled with fear.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about, and I know you do as well in your world, telling children it's okay to cry, right? We don't, we, 30, 40 years ago, people would say big boys don't cry or big girls don't cry. We don't say that anymore. And I wanted to contribute to the conversation around fear because, I recognize how crazy this sentence sounds, but it's scary to talk about fear
Yes.
because we don't want it to be a core part of the personality. We struggle with it because the antidote to fear is supposed to be just get out there. You got it. You can do it, which creates a whole nother level of anxiety when you can't.
Let's get into Harlem Honey because this book is so vibrant and honors the community, the neighborhood of Harlem. I grew up in New York City. I mean, to see places like the Apollo, Sylvia's pop up in such a vibrant way in this book feels like you not only wrote this beautiful book about this wonderful story with this wonderful lesson for children, but you also honored this really, really beautiful, historic, culturally important neighborhood in New York City. So let's start there. Talk to me about why this story was so important for you to tell.
Harlem was the backdrop because it was the first place my son called home. But truly, and this sounds cliche, there is a Harlem everywhere. What I mean by that, a neighborhood that we think we know, a neighborhood uh, that is the first place of exploration for a child. I actually had Dora the Explorer in mind, and I said, you know what? I love that she travels, but we want to take you to real places and real neighborhoods. And the character starts out moving from Texas to Harlem, first grader, intimidating, a new world, new places, and new faces. So, as much as it is a love letter to Harlem because it was our first home, it's a love letter to neighborhoods,
Mhm.
right? Because that's the first place you explore outside of your home. As I said, my son, within the confines of our home, was so outgoing. My son was born in 2019. His world, like all of ours,
Yeah.
shrunk. So he went from cousins and neighbors and friends to at 10 months, just the two of us. And his confidence really developed in the home. Now it was time to go to the grocery store. It was time to come out of our home and walk down the stoop, and a neighbor says, "Hi," eagerly, and you don't know what to say. So the backdrop of Harlem happens to be that that was our first neighborhood, but it's meant to represent every neighborhood because the journey for a child begins in the home. And even before they can go to school, they have to walk out the door of their neighborhood. That's why Sesame Street, the neighborhood is your first introduction to new places and new faces. I was at a school in Harlem a couple of weeks ago reading the book. And in Harlem, I said to them, "Have you ever seen the Apollo?" Half the class had not.
Okay.
Because we don't explore as much, I think. I think sometimes as an adult, we take it for granted. We can close our eyes and tell you how that awning looks. We can close our eyes and tell you probably the nearest grocery store. I can close my eyes right now and tell you the Kroger that's near my mom's house in Burleson, Texas, what side it's on, and all of these things. But these visuals, these things are just forming in their minds. And so even if they had seen the Apollo, they were unsure
Right.
because they've only had 8 years on the planet.
Absolutely. And I know everything with you is intentional. And that has to be, I see that on your show and I'm seeing it with this book, and we know how important representation is as a whole. We know how important it is for children, what they see on TV, the kind of media they absorb, and of course what they're reading. So what are you hoping, for children to get out of this book, especially those who might not always see themselves reflected back?
I love that question because I think people would assume because there are two characters of color on the cover. My family's diverse. My husband is Jewish. Obviously, I'm African American. My son is a mixed race child or multi background child. But what was important representation for me in this book was that the protagonist was the little boy.
Okay.
And not just because I have a son, but my eyes were open to contributing to this conversation through the lens of this boy because so many books that empowered me that I found on the shelves for my son had a young girl who was empowered. You know, I
Right.
remember my niece Gianna, who's texting me right now because she's like my child. She's now 19, taking her to see Brave. She loved Meredith because no longer were princesses in need of being saved. So from my age, I'm 54, I was fortunate to not only have it in the home, but a lot of the media that was brought into my home and the books that I read and, Judy Blume and Intosaki Shange for colored girls who've considered suicide. I had a steady stream of great um, data coming in that helped empower me. So fast forward, I have a son and I still see these remarkable arts of work meant to empower our girls or children who identify as girl or female. But in the landscape of boys, I found far fewer. And
Mm.
I know that, having this conversation can be received as controversial or not one that people want to have, but I can only tell from my perspective. I wanted my son to see this little boy who's an ally to a girl, and they are going through this adventure together, but he is able to talk about fear. Just as boys have been told in the past they can't cry, there are still images you can't be afraid. It's a spooky room. Hey, girl, you stay back. I'll go in. No, we're both afraid and let's go in together, And so I wanted to contribute to that space of reminding the world that little boys need to hear empowering messages and that little girls who grow up to be amazing women should not feel that the majority of young men, boys are adversaries or are negative influences in the workplace. I want my son to be the one who sticks up and not that he doesn't have to stick up for anyone, be on the side of the women in his workplace. And so that was an important element, almost more than race, if not more.
It's very interesting that you're saying this, and it certainly has caught me by surprise, but it is so relevant. It's also something that I'm seeing. It feels a little bit, and this might also be controversial that in the process of lifting our girls, we have forgotten about our boys a little bit. And I think this is so beautiful, and I love that you were able to kind of open my eyes to that this book is really, really, that was the intent.
And it's tough because I've benefited from the continued correcting of the wrongs of how women have been sent messages of being inferior or being in need of saving, right? I benefited from that.
Yeah.
And now, through my talk show, through traveling and speaking with so many other parents, I do believe I am not in the minority of parents, particularly those with boys who recognize that. I had a mom tell me recently, I don't want society to position my son as a scary person.
Right.
I don't want, and that's not through the lens of race. That means, remember, Me Too was at the formation of these kids, an important movement, but one that if not explained properly, could have turned every guy into, I remember, and this is a very, again, we're getting into these nuanced conversations, but I remember a man saying to me once, "Oh gosh, this means guys can't say anything." And I said, "Well, no, that's not what that means. And that's not the takeaway, right? People will take these messages and make them extreme. And so for young boys, I did not and I don't want to live in the world that makes my son feel that they fall under this cloud of toxic masculinity or these extremes, when in fact, they are able to be afraid and still stand up for themselves. They are able to cry and still be compassionate. The social and emotional development of boys in a positive way versus a stereotypical way, what they need.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said. And because Moses was the inspiration for the book, and I'm looking at the cover right now, what it was his reaction? I mean, it's so clearly
Oh,
him.
he's so funny. He's like, "That's me." And I said, "Yeah." And then he reads the book and he's like, "Oh." And then the characters look like my husband and Miss Louise is inspired by my mom. My mom's name is Mary Louise. And I don't think he's figured that part out because he's like, "Miss Louise doesn't live across the street from us." I'm like, "No, she doesn't," but he loves it. And I told him the other day because we still have moments of we went to a new friend's house. I guess it was over the weekend, and he'd never been to their home. They live in this beautiful home. We're out like in, this farmland, and the whole family was there to greet him. Now, from their point of view, they're like, we're so excited to see him. They haven't seen him in 4 years. We pull up, he sees 8 people at a door, and he's like, I'm not going in there. And I said, no, 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 no. So we stood by the car for a minute, and I said, this is, I told, then finally he's like, okay. And then he walks in and he's sheepishly smiling. So the fear has gone from, sweaty palms to, I need a break. And he even laughs at himself now, and then he kind of walks in. But and then other days he'll walk right into, a huge theater on Broadway and sit and watch a play with no issue. But yeah, no, it's funny for him to see it. So he told me the other day, I said, are you going to go with me on tour and read the book? He's a phenomenal, reader, and this is his gift right now, certainly. And he said, no, 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 you read. I'll set the table up, but I might sign an autograph. I said, what?
I want a Moses autograph.
Oh my God. I'm like, we're still working on size of lettering. I'm like, sir, the M is really big. Yeah, take it down. So no, he's doing great. But yeah, it is. It's so fun to create from an authentic space. It's also so fun to bring in different parents and just have this loving and supportive conversation on parenthood. It is, I know people say it's the hardest job, and it is because you're someone's life you're helping to shape, but it's my pinch me moment daily. It's my daily pinch me moment.
It's so beautiful. And certainly, we look to you, Tamron, as someone who's aspirational, who's just really creating beautiful stories for us to learn from. And then you have this beautiful family, and you're also just gorgeous. So like all of that, sorry, just to throw that out there. But because we look to you so much, I'm wondering, and I certainly not all of it, right, is
Oh,
perfect, right? We know
it's
there's
not.
struggles that
No.
go
I
with.
have 10,000 pounds of mascara on and a really good foundation right now.
But I think what I'm really trying to get at is because, we look to you for a lot of advice, a lot of inspiration. Certainly, I think moms are in a moment right now where I think a lot of us are just feeling like we're doing too much, right? Whether it's between the work, our own aspirations, the kids, that whatever side of the partisan, you fall on, it's a lot right now. Do you have any parting words for us in managing maybe our mental health, our physical health, and just the day-to-day of life?
I was talking with Amanda Gorman some years ago when her first book came out. And, I made a comment about, gosh, I did that, oh, kids today, my gosh, you got social media. I wouldn't want to be born in this time. And she quoted a popular saying, and forgive me if I don't know exactly who said it first, but she basically said, you are born in the time you're meant to handle. And I truly believe that. Um, Again, not to minimize the struggles of today because we have to, but I was just reading this beautiful essay on the Holocaust. And I know it sounds weird to say beautiful, but the love and the fight to protect and survive. Um, Many, many horrific atrocities that have happened, and parents and community have rallied to protect the young, to save the young so that we can keep going.
Mhm.
Um, it is overwhelming at times, but I sincerely believe that the children who are existing right now in New York, around the world, wherever, they have the adults that are meant to lead them through these challenging times. This is not the first of challenging times, politics, environment, you know, but that doesn't mean we are not equipped for it.
Mhm.
It requires, even for myself, I meditate, I take a deep breath. Sometimes the Amazon box has to stay on the ground a little bit longer. Give yourself grace. We want to offer it to others. We teach our children kindness to others, but we don't give ourselves grace in return. So what if, you know, everything is not exactly, as it's supposed to be. The crease in the pillow is just not right. The kid's hair is, so what? It really doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't, the right picture frame, the right outfit, the right look, and the pressures. I was watching the Oscars and I thought, can you imagine being the person who spent a whole year to pick out the outfit for you to end up on the worst dress list? What? No, you know what I mean? It's like, wait, I've literally been working on this whole look for a year while juggling my family and working for somebody to put me on a whole worst dress list. It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Give yourself some grace. I wrote a cookbook. If it doesn't turn out exactly the way Ina or myself, put a little more salt on it and make a different one tomorrow. It's okay. I actually give my kid digital. People, if it's going to give me 30 minutes of a reprieve to do something, we have our limitations on what he consumes. But yeah, you might see me at a restaurant with my son after he eats on his PlayStation for the next 15 minutes so that I can eat and talk to my husband. Okay. I think he's going to be okay.
It's
He's
gonna
not
be
gonna be
just fine. Yes.
just fine. Don't beat yourself up. Give yourself grace.
It's so beautiful. Actually, I wrote a whole book about that, and I talked about it a little bit on your show. So I'm like, I'm smiling
I'm
on the inside.
copying you.
Like, I'll pay you later, Tamron. Like, thanks
Because
for the.
listen, it's true. It's true. Your words and what you offered to our show and the conversation meant a lot to me and left an impression on me.
Oh, thank you.
And I appreciate that. It's not lost on me. I mean, none of what I've said is original. It's inspired by our conversation and inspired a little bit by my mom, who I just got off the phone with and said, give yourself a break. You know what I mean? And so, as long as we have parents like you and writers and reporters like you who are focused on that part of the conversation, not just here's another number or data or stat to prove that you aren't great or that your kid is doomed or that this is a really hard, thankless job called parenting.
Right.
You don't do that. And that's why it's an honor to talk with
Oh,
you. It's an honor to have you on my show. I think it's important. The last I'll leave you with, I saw this guy, he said he was getting married, and someone said, oh boy. And he said, why do you think that's the first thing someone wants to hear? This person is going to be with me and might be there on my last breath of my last day. And you say to me, oh boy. And you say,
not
I have a,
nice.
I have a 2-year-old. Oh boy.
No.
Oh, he's a 5-year-old. Good luck. It's like, what?
I know. Oh my gosh. No, you really inspired me because sometimes even in this world, you need that reset because it can be, you can really get like down in the spiral
I'm
of it.
not
But
naive about it.
yeah,
Listen, I'm going to get off this with you in a second and probably have a 5-year-old I'm not prepared for who
that's
doesn't
right.
want to tell me about his day and how he hated lunch. But and it's not to ignore the struggles, but we have got to figure out a balance because it's making us all sick.
All right, we're gonna leave it at that. That was, I mean, I love everything about you.
Thank you.
It's
Okay,
been such an honor talking to you, and
thank you.